Hey everyone, how are you doing? I'm feeling good, and today's story is about a guy who was like a guard dog for an organization that controlled him in the worst ways, sending him to kill monsters, go to battlefields, and risk his life. And because of that, he ends up dying. And what happened to him? Keep watching to find out. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you in advance. In a world completely overrun by demonic beasts, there was a man who truly enjoyed hunting them. He had already defeated the 32nd horde of monsters. Since the Great Halloween Catastrophe of 2024, the world had been invaded by infernal creatures. The power gap between humans and monsters was enormous. Only those who had surpassed human limits could fight against them. And among them all, the most powerful was Kay, an S-rank candidate. While observing the landscape from a distance, Kay spotted a gigantic monster. He believed the mission would only involve 33 monsters, as previously agreed. Suspicious, he asked through the communicator if they were messing with him. The response was that the man on the other end was not even on the battlefield, and that intelligence errors could happen. However, in the blink of an eye, the creature was already upon Kay. He was pulled by an overwhelming force, and in the next instant, was slashed by one of the monster's blades. At that moment, Kay thought that the dogs of the organization truly had no freedom. He just wanted to have lived a little longer in peace. The next second, he found himself trapped inside a baby playpen. Confused, he wondered why he was there. Soon after, he saw a woman approaching and asked himself if she was from the organization or if they had used some kind of spell on him. The woman, smiling, came closer and asked if he was already awake, calling him sweetheart and saying that mommy was there. Kay was completely confused. He spent several minutes trying to understand what was happening. The TV was on, so there was electricity. He could hear cars passing in the street and wondered if he had reincarnated into a body in another world where the catastrophe had never happened. If that were true, then the organization didn't exist there. That meant he was free. For the first time, he felt that God had not abandoned him. He knew he would never forget that day. He soon discovered he was in the year 2020 on planet Earth. In other words, he had awakened 4 years before the catastrophe. But then he wondered why God had been so cruel to him. After thinking it over, he changed his mind. Nothing was impossible for someone like him. Even so, at that moment, he could neither stand nor speak. He found himself dependent on the woman who called him her son. He thought maybe he could use her, depending on her skills. But the first thing she did was drop a box from the cabinet onto her own head. Kay tried to stay positive. He thought maybe agility was not her strong point. However, right after that, she let the rice cooker explode and nearly set the whole house on fire. Even with her hair scorched, she turned to the baby and said everything was fine and that she would soon manage to prepare his food. Kay started to think it already looked like the end of the world. Suddenly, they were interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. It was a delivery. Kay's mother ran to the door, but he was intrigued. It had been a long time since he had heard that word, delivery. If it was delivery person, then he had contact with many people. What if he was infected? The moment the delivery man opened the door, Kay realized he was right. That man was indeed infected. His monstrous power made all the boxes float around him. Kay was startled. A creature had appeared right there in front of him. He needed to get out of the playpen as fast as possible. He threw a pillow to the ground and, in the next second, was nearly hit by a shot from the creature. He jumped onto the pillow to shield himself and understood that if that monster touched him, he would die. In his past life, he had accumulated a lot of knowledge about monsters in combat. He knew very well that a normal human body could not fight them directly. After a quick analysis, he deduced it was an amplification-type monster. Its brute strength was terrifying, but they weren't very smart. So, simply, Kay placed a baby bottle on the floor for the monster to slip on. And that's exactly what happened. The creature fell out the window. Kay thought that, finally, all that accumulated experience had served some purpose. But without realizing it, something strange happened. A kind of tail grew from his body, launched itself at the fallen creature, and extracted its magic crystal. Kay was confused, as he had no idea what that was. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was the ability he had in his past life, the Tail of Teoti. He was even more surprised to realize he had been born 3 years after the catastrophe, but was now back 4 years before it. And yet, the abilities from his past life were still with him. Kay didn't understand anything, but he knew he had gotten lucky. The Tail of Teoti had the ability to absorb the cores of monsters, so he decided to try something. He used the core of the monster he had thrown out the window and activated one of its abilities, causing a blade of flesh to appear in place of his arm. He thought that in his past life, at the age of 7, he was already an S rank. Now, with the power of absorption, he could easily reach the legendary class. His era had finally begun. But before he could react, he realized his body would not move. During the previous battle, one of the legs of the playpen had broken and ended up falling directly on him. Kay's mother reacted at the last moment, and before losing consciousness, he remembered his dark days when he had to eat dog food to survive. Later, when he woke up, the first thing he thought was that he was no longer a dog. He felt whole. The woman had saved him. He also realized that he had fainted, perhaps because the power was too great for the fragile body of a baby. He could barely keep his abilities active for 30 seconds, but his thoughts were interrupted when he noticed that his mother was crying. She was holding a diary full of notes, sticky notes, and stickers. She also had a wound on her shoulder, probably caused when she saved him. Kay thought that in his past life, his mother had sold him to the organization, but this woman seemed to be different, so he decided he would stay with her a little longer. He became sure of that when, upon waking up, he was hugged tightly by the woman, who called him her dear little boy. Even so, Kay knew he did not have much time. The world would soon change drastically. He could feel that the next monster would appear very close to him. Later, his mother gave him a special gift, a dog. Kay was surprised. He knew that dog. He could hardly believe he would meet it again in this new life, but he thought the animal might be too big to play with a child like him. On the other hand, he thought it could be an advantage. If he trained it properly, he could use it as a mount or to scare away monsters. A dog of that size could be very useful. So his special training began. He placed a treat in front of the dog, expecting it to recognize who the master was. The dog stood still, looking dumb, until it finally took the treat. Kay took advantage of the moment and stepped on the animal's head to show who was in charge there, but it did not work. The dog stepped on his face with full force. Kay lunged and started trading blows with the dog in a chaotic clash between the two. While they fought, the mother believed with complete innocence that they were becoming great friends. But at that exact moment, while the woman was distracted, the two sensed a presence behind her. A monster was approaching. The first to act was the dog. It began barking furiously at the creature, which revealed itself to be a slime. Without hesitation, the dog pushed Kay's mother into the sink just as she bent down to pick something up. Kay was amazed at how clumsy that woman could be. He thought a slime was weak but extremely annoying to deal with. Because of its liquid body, it was practically immune to piercing attacks. The woman had hit her head on the sink while trying to stand up. Meanwhile, the dog had been captured by the slime and was being slowly digested. Kay had to improvise. He grabbed a bottle of baby powder and threw it at the monster. The chemical reaction caused the slime to split into several parts, which started bouncing all over the place. Taking advantage of the chaos, Kay grabbed one of the pieces and used the trash can to capture the slime's main core. He thought everything had worked out, thanks to him, of course. And the moment the woman stood up, she ended up dropping a plate on her own head. She muttered that it was just her luck, because now she would have to clean everything. While she complained, Kay analyzed the captured slime. He felt that he had truly been lucky. That slime could be used as an excellent monster repellent. If he coated the windows with that goo, it could also serve as protection against shrapnel. It was a good resource, but there was a problem. Kay was not yet strong enough to keep the slime trapped inside the trash can, so the monster escaped. The dog even tried to bite it, but it was useless. Kay tried to capture it again with the trash can, but the slime escaped through the window and even had the audacity to flip them off before fleeing. Both Kay and the dog were furious, and at that moment, driven by hatred and the desire for revenge, the two joined forces to capture the damn slime. Kay mounted the dog as if he were a true knight on his warhorse, holding an umbrella like a lance. Without the mother noticing, they left the apartment and went straight to the building's courtyard. How this was possible, no one knows. But Kay could not understand how that woman could be so absent-minded. Upon reaching the ground floor, Kay was fast enough to spot the slime attacking its next victim, a little girl who happened to be walking by, unaware of the danger. He thought he could destroy the monster with a single attack using his powers, but he knew it would leave him paralyzed for a long time. He might even pass out. Even so, if that girl were infected by the slime, it would be the end for her. Without hesitation, Kay made a powerful leap with the help of his guard dog. In the air, he opened the umbrella to repel the slime's attack. He bounced off the courtyard walls to gain momentum and finally used the amplification ability to extend his arm and crush the monster. It worked. Now it was raining goo everywhere. The little girl, completely terrified, ran away. Kay understood her reaction. It was understandable. He thought it was time to clean everything up, but to his surprise, he did not even need to. The tail of Coyote acted on its own, absorbing the slime's core and granting him the creature's power. Kay noticed that his abilities were starting to coexist. In his past life, he used almost exclusively the amplification ability. He avoided switching powers so he would not be detected by the organization. But that was also what led to his death. He then remembered something important. The younger and awakened one adapts to their powers, the stronger they become in the future. When he was adopted by the organization at 10 years old, the other candidates died because their bodies could not withstand the monster's toxin. But he survived. Kay was a rare awakened being, a high-level adapter. His potential now was practically unlimited. So he got off the dog and went to fulfill his true mission. He used the slime's power to spread a sticky barrier around the building, creating a monster-repellent shield. But he was completely exhausted. He had expected this, as his baby body still could not handle the continuous use of abilities. While trying to rest, he noticed that the dog was glaring at him. Without saying a word, the dog grabbed him by the shirt and dragged him back inside the house. Later, after cleaning the whole mess and taking a bath, Kay's mother was happy to see the baby and the dog lying together. They looked like great friends now, but Kay was silently suffering because the dog was incredibly heavy. The next afternoon, Kay had already completed his mission while the dog slept, snoring loudly. He had finished the protective barrier around the building using the slime's power. He knew that until the great catastrophe came, at least that place would be a little safer. Little by little, Kay was also better understanding the secrets of the tale of Teoti. Upon closer observation, he noticed that it had 4 pouch-like cells shaped like honeycombs. This meant he could store up to 4 different abilities. At the moment, he could use 2, but only for 30 seconds. But Kay also knew he needed something more than strength. If he wanted to survive the catastrophe, he would have to prepare in advance, and that meant gathering supplies. Most of the deaths during the Great Catastrophe did not happen because of monsters, but to a lack of supplies. People who had no food or water simply died. Those who fought over those resources ended up dying as well. That is why Kay knew that if he managed to stock everything in advance, foreseeing future events, he would have a huge advantage. And more than that, other people would start to follow him for his brilliance. He wanted to start preparing as soon as possible because he knew the markets would soon be overrun by monsters. And when more than one person got infected, the monsters multiplied rapidly. In his current state, he could not fight many at once, so he needed to look for alternatives, other places, other ways to get supplies. That was when he noticed his mother's phone on the table. The device was unlocked and already open on the messaging app, right in the building's group chat. He took the opportunity and wrote a message, warning that the catastrophe was coming and that it was urgent to gather supplies. But no one took it seriously. No one believed him. Kay thought that with that level of stupidity, they would die before even realizing what was happening. Suddenly, he received a private message. Someone had taken an interest in what he wrote. The account name was Hot, and upon seeing that name, Kay became suspicious. He wondered if it was the same Hot from the organization. Meanwhile, Hot was laughing to herself, finding it all very amusing. She started chatting with Kay and made him an offer. She said she could provide him with everything he needed: water, food, weapons, but of course, everything had a price. The information about the location of those supplies would be sold for 100 million Yemen. However, since it would also be difficult to transport everything, she offered another option. If he agreed to deliver 20% of the supplies to her, the deal would be done. Kay found it strange. The writing style seemed like that of an elementary school student, yet the conversation involved 100 million. He was sure that was the Hot he knew. Even so, he asked how he could trust her, and what if he did not want to negotiate? Hot simply replied by asking if he really intended to make her an enemy. Faced with that, he demanded to know the location immediately. He wanted to get straight to the point. So Hot answered that she had left all the information in the mailbox of the building where he lived. Kay knew that the organization did not exist yet at that time, but that girl was clearly dangerous. Even if she would not be a leader in the future, she manipulated information and played with people like chess pieces. Kay knew this game. He knew she was probably using this situation as bait to attract his attention. But this time would be different. This time, he would be the one to cause chaos. But before anything else, he slept. After all, he was a baby and needed a nap. 2 hours later, he woke up refreshed, with enough energy to go retrieve the promised information. But he noticed a problem. The elevator had a surveillance camera, and going down all the stairs would be very difficult with his current body. So he woke up his dog by squeezing its tail, but the dog noticed it and smacked him in the face with its tail, which made our protagonist wonder what that was. A bit confused, but as soon as he saw a treat, he forgot everything. Kay placed the treat in front of him. Deal sealed. Everything ready. Now it was time to go. Kay thought that dog was actually quite convenient, so he and his 4-legged companion set off before Mommy could wake up. They managed to reach the ground floor, but Kay noticed there was a camera installed there too. He knew very well that if he were recorded, the footage would be sent straight to Hot. So at that moment, his goal became fooling the surveillance. Using his amplification power, Kay analyzed the surroundings. Besides the building's regular cameras, he found 3 more hidden ones, all installed by Hot herself. But Kay was not naive enough to fall for such a simple trick. While Hot watched, waiting to identify her new victim, she grabbed the cell phone hidden among his airbags and was surprised to see only a dog in front of the camera. The truth was that Kay had discovered a blind spot shared by all the cameras, so he placed the dog in front and went to get the information he needed. However, suddenly Hot spoke to him through the camera microphone, asking who the hell he was. Kay replied with a message saying that if she wanted the answer, she would have to send 100 million. Hot was furious. No one messed with her like that. In response, she used one of her special toys, a spider equipped with a camera, resistant to dust, water, high temperatures, anti-magnetism, and with fast movement. However, the spider ended up being crushed by Mommy, who had woken up and saw the dog down there. She asked what the little pup was doing in that place. While Kay worried that everything had gone down the drain, Hot cried over the loss of her spider. At that moment, she remembered that the device also had a communication function, which allowed her to hear Mommy's conversation with her son. Even without getting any replies, she listened to the scolding from Mommy and became irritated. She swore she would get her revenge someday. But for now, she was curious to find out who that boy was. Mommy picked up her son, saying that place was very dangerous. That was when Hot gave in. She said she would give the information for free, and even send supplies. Kay was surprised, after all. He had barely done anything, and had already won that battle. Later, Mommy punished the dog, thinking he had opened the door. He was tied up, crying, poor thing. Kay watched the scene and thought he would soon rescue him. Based on the information given by Hot, Kay discovered that a supermarket warehouse would be opening soon. It seemed like she was passing along data she had stolen from other people, which was rather generous of her. For him, gathering supplies as soon as possible would be ideal. Kay left the supermarket flyer on the table, hoping his mom would see it, but she did not notice. He could not just get up and say the end of the world was coming. She would freak out. Then, as if by fate, Mommy mentioned there was only enough milk for 5 more days. Kay saw the perfect opportunity. He intentionally spilled the powdered milk on the floor. When Mommy saw it, she realized her son was asleep and concluded she would have to go out to buy more milk. Coincidentally, there was a supermarket flyer right there on the table. She thought it would not hurt to stop by, and Kay, still pretending to sleep, simply thought to himself that the mission had been accomplished. Later, they were out for a walk. Kay was wearing an adorable little pink outfit, and the dog had been freed from punishment. However, Mommy ended up putting too much food in his bowl. While she was leaving the condominium as if nothing were happening, a guard showed up to warn her, saying that in recent days, a highly contagious disease had been spreading. Even so, Mommy replied that she needed to buy milk. Kay thought that guard was probably from the government. The government was still trying to hold people back, but he knew that soon all of them would be gone. The guard insisted that it did not matter the reason. She should go back home until things calmed down. However, before he could finish, he was grabbed by a monster. The creature crushed the guard's head with a simple squeeze and devoured the body, while saying it was protein. Kay immediately understood that it was an extremely dangerous type of monster, capable of multiplying its strength. Physically, it had no visible weakness. If Kay could not use his power, he would die, and so would Mommy. Before Kay could react, Mommy picked him up from the stroller and ran. He was glad she was at least trying to flee, but he knew it would be useless because the creature was much faster. Luckily, Kay noticed there were several fire extinguishers nearby, scattered around the condominium. So he used his amplification power to extend a spear and break all of them at once. The cloud of chemical powder spread quickly, hiding his movements. That was enough to allow Kay to land a flying amplified kick directly on the monster. Even though he was still a baby, he could stand on his own thanks to the amplification of his body. He knew he would have only 30 seconds to kill that creature and needed to do it without anyone noticing. At least his mommy was unconscious, but he did not know for how long. Since that was a growth-type monster, Kay knew its weak point was a core hidden inside the head. If he could hit that spot hard enough, he might defeat it. However, when the creature walked toward him, he realized it would not be that simple. He would have to end it with a single attack. When the creature tried to strike, Kay managed to dodge and used his bindings to trap the enemy's body. The ropes caused small cuts, but they were just scratches, insignificant against the size of the creature. Even so, Kay did not give up. He used the ropes mainly to move agilely, dodging attacks while drawing more and more blood. For the monster, hitting such a small baby was very difficult. It was like a cat trying to catch a mouse. After a few seconds, the creature was already tired. Kay was too, but he felt proud of his performance despite being a baby. What he did not expect was for the monster to rip off a piece of a car and try to hit him with it. He ended up getting grazed on the forehead and, at that moment, was unsure what to do. He was injured, at a terrain disadvantage, and far from the creature. To make matters worse, his mommy woke up. She was confused, unsure of what to do, especially after seeing that monster. Kay noticed she was rummaging through her purse and thought she needed to get out of there immediately. However, to his surprise, Mommy pulled out a taser and electrocuted the monster. Kay did not expect his mommy to have a shock weapon, but that attack created the opening he needed. Even though the taser was knocked away by the monster right after, Kay used the moment to strike the creature right in the center of the head with a drill, ending the fight once and for all. Kay thought that if it were not for his mommy, he would never have been able to defeat that monster. Just remembering that she risked her own life for him made him realize that he still needed to train much more. After all the fighting, he became so exhausted that he only woke up a few hours later. When he opened his eyes, he saw a man changing his diapers. Kay was outraged, thinking that man was some kind of pervert, and told him to get out of there by shooting a jet of pee straight into the poor guy's mouth. Mommy apologized, but the man said it was fine, that the baby was probably just scared. He also commented about the dog, and Kay realized that this was the neighbor who had given the dog to them as a gift. Mommy replied that the dog was doing great and thanked him for the help, but Kay began to find everything very strange. Mommy had seen the monster, yet she was acting as if nothing had happened. On top of that, her hair was a little damp, and he imagined that maybe she had cried in secret again. The neighbor then informed Hayashi Sakuragi that everyone was preparing to leave and restock their supplies. Kay thought he was at least somewhat smart, but while they were distracted organizing everything, Kay went back to the ground floor to pick up the core of the defeated creature. Since that monster was a strengthening type, he did not gain a new ability, but instead reinforced the ones he already had. Now he could harden his blood and flesh threads. However, Kay noticed that his neighbor was also down there talking on the phone. The man clearly said that this was the reason they had brought the child and the mother. In an emergency, they could use them as bait to escape. Kay thought that was completely insane and became certain that something was wrong with that man. After all, who leaves a huge dog with a baby? While speaking on the phone, the neighbor asked them to get the vehicle and stock more supplies. Suddenly, a shard of glass from the car fell on the ground, drawing his attention. He approached, but did not suspect Kay because he looked like nothing more than a little baby. He asked how he had gotten there, but quickly went back to his call, saying that no one had interrupted anything, that it was just a stupid baby. He even added that if he killed the baby right there, it would not be a problem. He just would not do it at that moment. Kay was shocked. That man was completely insane. Later, everyone was already inside the car, filled with residents from the same condominium. The psychopathic neighbor was driving, and even then, Kay wondered how no one there seemed to have seen any monsters. Why was everyone acting as if the outside world was still normal? As the vehicle continued through the streets, there were other cars around them. Kay thought that maybe this was some type of human defense mechanism. Even when seeing monsters or corpses, people were not always able to accept that the world was ending. The brain tried to believe in the most plausible explanation, so everyone pretended everything was normal just to avoid panic. The trip grew longer, and Hayashi Sakuragi offered some snacks to everyone, such as sandwiches and hot dogs. Kay took the chance to smear some snot onto the sandwich the driver was going to eat. One of the people who received a sandwich was Densora from apartment 103, who asked how life had been for Mommy while raising a child alone. The resident Leo Kexian from apartment 109 also commented that she wanted to know. She found it curious that Mommy was young, beautiful, did not seem to work, and still went out alone from the condominium without being afraid of the danger outside. Hayashi said that dealing with all of that had been a bit overwhelming, especially because lately, whenever her son was left alone, he did whatever he wanted. She only decided to bring him after thinking a long time about the situation. Chenshu commented that Miss Hayashi could be useful in a fight, since she had managed to defeat one of those monsters using a taser. Now, on top of that, they also had a dog. This dog was inside the truck they would use to store supplies, but if he stayed inside the vehicle with so many people, the situation would become strange. Hayashi said that, to be honest, she did not really remember what had happened. Kay thought the idea of his mother being useful in combat was a complete joke. Chenshu said it was alright since there did not seem to be any monsters nearby. However, he spoke too soon because as they were driving down one of the streets, they saw a woman being chased by a horde of bizarre insect monsters. The driver told everyone to hold on tight and had to swerve quickly to avoid hitting the woman or the monsters. Even so, while swerving, the woman was caught by the creatures. Kay thought that day was truly chaotic. Now they were all surrounded. He recognized those monsters. They had insect heads, sting marks on their necks, and were clearly being controlled by a queen monster, or something similar to a hive mind. It was as if they were obeying a collective consciousness. These were parasite controllers, creatures that turned humans into puppets. Individually, they were not strong, but the problem arose when they formed hordes. They kept multiplying exponentially. Kay thought they needed to get out of there immediately, but one of the creatures had already shattered the front glass. Kay realized that in the middle of so many people, he would not be able to use his powers. And even if he tried, he could only use them for 30 seconds. If he wasted them now, everything would be lost. He wondered if there was truly no one in that car who knew how to fight. Meanwhile, Liu Kexian started to panic, asking if no one was going to do anything to save the woman who was being attacked. Kay was outraged, thinking she had to be joking. If she was so worried, why did she not go herself? Kay even considered that leaving that woman behind might not be such a bad idea. Liu Kexian was annoying and probably useless in combat. Then another resident, Shin Minoru from apartment 509, said it was already too late to save her, as she had been wounded and was likely already infected by the parasite. Kay concluded that the old man had good eyes and might actually be useful in combat. Chenshu asked if they should not just run over the monsters, since they would have to get rid of them to escape. Kay wondered if that guy was trying to kill everyone inside the car because he clearly was not trustworthy. The truck driver was probably just the same. Suddenly, Densora spoke up, saying he would fight the creatures. He had grabbed an improvised weapon, but was so nervous that he nearly fainted on the spot. Kei could not think of any efficient way out of that situation either. That was when Hayashi revealed she had a weapon stored in her bag. Kei questioned whether his mom really intended to fight since that seemed absurd, but no one stopped Hayashi because no one wanted to leave the vehicle to face the monsters. Densora simply said he was relieved he would not have to fight anymore, as he was now counting on her. Without Kei noticing, his chest was pierced by a monster, and he was thrown out of the car. The one who appeared was the leader of the parasites herself, who also struck Leukexian straight in the chest. Her next target would be Hayashi. Kei immediately understood that this was the main body of the creature, and thought that, at least this time, the monster was being stupid. A parasite leader should never expose itself. It should stay hidden, far from the battlefield. But now, he had a good chance to fight. The problem was that his mother had been attacked, and he could not stop it. In truth, it was Shin Minoru who stabbed the creature in the neck. He had quick enough reflexes to grab the stinger and twist the monster's body until it broke. Kei was impressed. Shin Minoru strangled the creature with his bare hands, drove a knife into its neck until it bled, and died. Chenshu was in shock, trying to understand who this man was who could kill a monster with a pocket knife. Shin Minoru calmly commented that he was getting old and that it had taken longer than it should have. Kei thought that man was truly amazing, but he quickly realized the fight was not over. The monster was not dead. As if to warn them, Kei himself began to cry loudly, drawing everyone's attention. Only then did Shin Minoru notice the creature was still standing. This time he was caught off guard and almost hit by the stinger, but he managed to dodge. Then he remembered that, back when he was part of the combat division, this type of parasite only died when the heart was hit. Kei realized that man was part of the special combat division, which explained his skills. With determination, Shin Minoru charged again. With his simple knife, he struck the parasite's eye, kneed the creature in the face, and with that, created an opening to pierce its heart. The decision was fast, clean, and efficient. Kei admired the precision of the strike. He thought he should have realized earlier that man was a soldier. In Kei's past life, when he was still a dog of the organization, even though the military had already been wiped out, he had heard rumors about the existence of the Special Combat Division. These soldiers were known as the greatest resistance force against monsters. For Kei, it was a relief to know that someone like that was nearby. Now, at last, they could proceed to the supermarket. However, Hayashi was worried. She suggested that maybe it would be better to return home. Shin Minoru disagreed. He said something could happen on the way back, and that, in that case, it would be better to move forward. At least that way they would get through everything at once and still come back with supplies. Meanwhile, Kei began to think about a plan to keep that man close to them. Should he pretend to have some kind of military authority? Or should he try to blackmail him to get information? Maybe it would be better just to stick to him and force him to protect them. In the end, he did not need to do any of that. Shin Minoru, with unexpected kindness, patted Kei's head and said he wanted the two of them to stay close so that he could protect them. Not to mention that, when the child cried, it ended up alerting everyone that the creature was still alive. Deep down, the more someone seemed a little dumb, the more they desired to improve. Kei wondered who that old man was calling dumb. He thought he might be mad, but decided to gladly accept the offer he had made. When they finally arrived at the supermarket, the sun was already setting, and Minoru noticed that the doors were closed. But Kei thought that would not be a problem for Hot, since she could hack anything. As expected, she managed to unlock the entrance. The crazy guy himself explained that he had a contact inside, which made Kei realize that this guy also knew Hot. Later, Kei was hanging from one of the shopping carts, completely exhausted. Even so, he tried to stay cheerful because he was finally in the place he had been so eager to reach. Hayashi was also nearby, taking the puppy for a walk inside the market. Kei noticed that the security cameras were disabled, so there was no need to worry about surveillance footage. But then he noticed something strange on Minoru's back. He was carrying a weapons case, which made sense, since he was a former soldier from the Special Combat Division. Kei also found it strange that the crazy guy had disappeared. Hayashi, a bit lost, noticed that there were no staff in the store and everything was dark. But then the crazy guy showed up and told them not to worry. He said all the items in that store had already been purchased by his organization. Even the dog sensed something wrong and started barking at him. That was when he explained that he had gathered as many people from the condominium as possible, just to use them as help to get into the supermarket. But now, they were no longer needed. Kei saw the Lotus tattoo on his arm and understood it was the symbol of the organization. The man then declared that from that moment on, all supplies there were the property of the Lotus Society, and he asked if anyone had any objections. His hand was already near his weapon, ready to react if anyone complained. The Lotus of the East East was well known. They were the forerunners of the organization. They were the enforcers of the so-called hunting project. Even before the calamity, they were already committing crimes. But with chaos spreading, they used their power to monopolize resources. That explained the bad feeling Kei had from the beginning. Now he thought he was dead the moment that guy laid his baby hands on him. Minoru also realized they were surrounded on all sides, down the market aisles. He knew that group very well, and his first reaction was to throw a shovel straight at the power box, causing an explosion that blacked out everything. But the crazy guy remained calm. That was because he was holding a remote control. With a click of the button, a forklift was activated and threw the old man across the room. Right after, Minoru had a gun pointed at his head. The Lotus member warned that if he moved, he would be dead. It was that simple. It was then that Hayashi appeared with her taser. She warned that if he shot, she would shoot too. She wanted to know why he was doing all that. The Lotus man asked if she was serious. Hayashi said yes. She said they could still share the supplies. The guy admitted he even found her amusing. So stupid talking like that. He said she should not act like she was in control of the situation. And then he asked if she knew why he had left the dog with her. He said it was out of pure benevolence. He had gone to collect a debt from a man, but when he got there, the guy had already taken his own life because he could not pay what he owed. It was at that place that he found the dog. In fact, he was going to get rid of that dog. He was about to take it to the dump when Hayashi showed up, saying the dog was cute. The crazy guy thought she had a baby at home and imagined that with a dog that size wearing a muzzle, everything would be fine for him. He even wondered if Hayashi was insane to put such a big animal in the same house as a baby, and thought it was impressive that the child was still alive. Right after, he fired a shot into the air to show that he was the one in charge there. The whole Eastern Lotus group entered the market armed, pointing their weapons at all the innocent people. Kei realized that man was making the weak suffer exactly like the organization always did. The first to react was the dog, who started barking at all of them, creating enough distraction for Kei to use his slime. Kei shot at the power box again, turning everything off. With his amplification power, he could sense where people were even in the dark. The first person he took down was the crazy neighbor who had gone hysterical. Meanwhile, Minoru had already gotten back on his feet. They stared at each other for a moment, and Kei realized he had been caught using his powers. He panicked, thinking he would be taken for experiments again and would become a lab rat once more. Minoru, in turn, wondered if that child was a monster and tried to hit him with a few strikes. Kei used the darkness to hide and thought that, out of everyone there, messing with that old man was the worst option. So maybe he would have to take him down too. But everyone was surprised when a giant slime invaded the market. It was above the structure, leaking through cracks and pipes. Kei thought that finally luck was on his side. Minoru, however, faced a different problem. The slime created a clone of him to attack directly. That did not happen just to him. The slime was producing clones of everyone there to possess the bodies of the real people. Minoru realized that this would be a huge problem. He also saw that Hayashi and the baby were in danger. Kei then took advantage of the situation to create a slime clone that looked like himself and trick the old man. Minoru had seen Kei using powers before, but now assumed it was just the clone. He had to dodge a strike from his own clone and responded with a shovel hit to its neck. Any person would have died, but the slime regenerated quickly. Minoru knew what he was up against and opened his weapon case because the creature's weakness was electricity. Even so, the first to use electricity was Hayashi with her taser. Kei had no trouble getting rid of the clone attacking him. When Minoru took down his own clone using electricity, he finished it off by burning it with a flamethrower. Still, the slime army kept coming. When one of the monsters approached Hayashi, Minoru shot it in the head. He gave one last look at Kei, who got nervous. But the old man decided it was better to defeat the monsters first, before dealing with the possible monstrous baby. Kei then realized the member of the Eastern Lotus was still alive and thought he would have to kill that bastard himself. But he knew that if he used his power again, Minoru would become even more suspicious. Before he could do anything, Kei was caught off guard by the enemy himself, who kicked the cart and pushed Hayashi away. The man grabbed the child and ordered everyone to drop their weapons. Kei thought it was convenient for his plans, but the man threatened to shoot the baby. However, he was interrupted by one of his own allies who was being possessed by a slime. Kei arrived already pulling the pin from a grenade. The explosion was strong enough to create a distraction, allowing the enemy to run with Kei out of the market. During the escape, Kei took advantage of the opportunity to grab the monster's crystal. Outside, the Lotus group was already waiting for their leader and commented that it had been quick. The boss explained that something completely unexpected had happened and ordered everyone to regroup immediately. That was when Kei noticed something curious on the man's neck. There was a tattoo that said liar. He then understood that the real liar had been this man all along, the same one who always fed him false information during missions. Before, he wore a mask, but now Kei could finally see his face. Liar asked why the little baby was staring at him like that, but he soon noticed that his own subordinates were being attacked by a monster. Kei immediately immediately recognized the phenomenon. It was the crimson mist, something extremely dangerous for humans. Depending on a person's resistance, that mist could turn anyone into a monster. That was exactly what happened. All the Lotus subordinates turned into bizarre creatures that immediately charged at Liar. In a cowardly move, he used Kay as a shield, throwing the child like a piece of trash. Kay thought that man was truly pathetic, but he knew not to underestimate him. So he decided to use the power he had just obtained to transform. The new form was similar to the one he had in his past life. The transformation would not last long, but it would be enough to defeat all those monsters. Now, Kay controlled the power of shadows. He combined his abilities with shadowy tentacles and managed to take down the first monster, which was weaker. The real problem was the larger enemy, a creature that looked like a golem made of corpses and bodies. It was big and heavy, but very slow. Kay easily pierced its chest and, using the power of shadows, took control of it and made it explode. Chunks of flesh and body parts flew everywhere. When Liar returned, he was in shock. He could not understand who that boy was. Kay was relieved that he had not seen the transformation. Now it was his turn. He promised that Liar would pay for everything he had done to him in his past life. The enemy tried to respond, shooting at him, but the bullet seemed too slow compared to Kay's new speed. Using the shadows, he passed through the bullet, grabbed Liar, and threw him like a soda can. Liar hit the ground, weak and powerless to react. Kay said this was the end. Liar then mumbled that maybe that other guy's story was not a lie after all. Kay, confused, asked what guy he was talking about, but Liar just told the boy not to get too full of himself. Kay had not won yet. Liar grabbed a syringe filled with monster virus and injected it into his own neck, turning into a grotesque and massive creature. More specifically, he became exactly the same monster that had killed Kay in his past life, a fleshy orb surrounded by spinning blades. The sight left Kay in shock. He was now at a disadvantage, maybe due to trauma, or maybe because that creature was truly stronger than him. His movements were slow, his dodges were imprecise, and he was even grazed by one of the blades, losing his arm made of shadows. Kay understood that everything had been a trap from the start. Liar had always been part of the plan that led to his death in the past. Even so, even without one arm, Kay decided to fight back. He thought Liar had already killed him enough times. His shadow blast, however, caused no damage as the creature protected itself with its blades. Still, Kay held firm. He would not die twice to the same monster. That was when he received help from Mamoru, who was shooting at the creature with a high-caliber weapon. The weapon was not even his, since he had stolen it from the Lotus people, but it was proving extremely useful. The shots were powerful enough to break the blades protecting the creature's core, creating an opening that Kay immediately noticed. Meanwhile, it became clear what had happened to Liar. He had been warned by a woman that the catastrophe would soon begin in that world, and that if he wanted to survive, he would need to join forces with the organization. Before anything else, she gave him a small talisman, which was actually the syringe. She promised it would awaken his true nature. Just before injecting the substance, Liar finally understood who he really was. He had always been born to take advantage of other people's weakness. When he was still a child, he once told his own aunt that her husband was cheating on her. She did not believe him and called him a stupid kid, but he showed the man on his phone and asked if that was not her husband. He said the man was sleeping with another woman at that very moment. The aunt got furious and hit her husband, but the man explained that he had never cheated on anyone and that he would ask for a divorce because of that madness. The aunt ended up with nothing and started to believe it was because she was ugly. Liar, however, comforted her by promising a better place, a place where no one would be judged by their appearance. That was how he created the Lotus, gathering weak people, rejected and discarded by society, just to turn them into profit. He had always taken advantage of them. That was his true nature, someone who played with others without remorse. With the injection, he reached his final form, the form of a level 4 monster called Deceitful Liar, a completely black being with a single eye on its chest, an eye capable of seeing the truth and lies inside any person. Kay realized that the creature's power came from that eye, which created hallucinations showing exactly what the person feared most. Anyone who looked into that glowing red eye would be overwhelmed, but Kay would not fall for that, especially because he still had the support of Mamoru, who kept shooting directly at the monster's eye. The red eye responded by firing several lasers at them. Mamoru, experienced and calm, took cover and continued attacking, but the shots had no effect. Liar began to panic. He could not see anyone. He could no longer see anything. Liar became so confused and disoriented that he was caught by Kay, who was already pressing his shadow blade against his neck. Even though he was grazed, Liar managed to escape at the last second. He could not understand how that kid had escaped his hallucination. After all, he was a level 4 monster, but to Kay that was nothing special. Kay continued attacking with his shadow stinger, trying to hit the enemy with precise strikes. Liar dodged the tentacles and tried once again to use his hallucination power, but it no longer worked. Kay was now immune to it. Faced with that, Liar decided to use his firepower, firing a beam straight at Kay. But Kay remembered perfectly the taste taste of death he had experienced because of that monster in his past life. He fought back with all his strength, aiming straight at Liar's chest, right at the eye that was the source of his power. The attack was not fatal, but it hit the enemy's shoulder, leaving him seriously wounded. Kay asked if that was all he had, but inside, he was worried. The next monster storm would begin in just 2 hours. It would be the first humanity had to face. Even with that concern, Kay once again placed the shadow blade at Liar's neck, ready to decapitate him. The enemy asked him to wait. Kay replied that he was not interested in the last words of a liar like him, but Liar had already bought enough time to dodge the final blow. When Kay prepared to strike again, the enemy took on the form of his mother and asked if he would really have the courage to kill his own mother. Kay said he would not fall for that trick, but before he could react, he was hit by another laser. However, that was just an illusion. Liar mocked him, saying it was a pity he could not kill him for real, but with his eyes, he could read his mind, his thoughts, feelings, and movements. He said Kay had no way to escape anymore. Kay then thought maybe it would be better to leave the final blow to the old man. But Minoru's shot missed the target. He wondered if the old man was still alive, but at that moment, he remembered that regular weapons do not work against level 4 monsters. Liar decided to have some fun before finishing them off and went after Minoru, but he was no longer behind the cover. In his place, there was only a flash grenade. The explosion blinded Liar for a few seconds, leaving him vulnerable. Kay thought the old man was really good, but he had no idea where he was. Not even Kay had predicted what would come next. A stab in Liar's back, delivered by Minoru. Even wounded, Liar managed to fight back. He only did not kill Minoru because Kay protected him using his power. Kay wondered if Liar really knew the future. When he turned around, he was surprised. How did that kid know his name? That doubt distracted him so much that he was shot in the shoulder by Minoru with a precise hit. He collapsed instantly. Kay took the chance and entered his mind, saying he was just a coward who took advantage of others' weakness. He said that by himself, Liar was incapable of doing anything. He was a loser. Liar, overwhelmed by negative thoughts, sank into confusion, rage, and despair. In one last blind impulse, he rushed to attack Minoru, but had his head cut off by Kay before he could do anything. Then Kay, looking at the fallen body, wondered who really cared about the past. In the end, he seemed to be the only fool who still believed in that lie. At the moment of his death, Liar found himself untransformed. He had turned human again and remembered everything he had gone through, everything he had done. He was facing his final judgment. Even with his head rolling on the ground, he was still alive, screaming and asking if that was what everyone wanted. He said that baby, that boy, was the real egg of calamity. He claimed that the boy would be responsible for the great disaster of humanity and that it was all his fault. However, Liar's head was finally blown apart by one last shot. The person who fired said that guy just would not shut up. Right after, he spotted the armored car the man had arrived in and realized he was a soldier, a direct apprentice of Minoru himself, the Snow Wolf captain, Lion. He was even attacked by a monster on the rooftop, but even with his back turned, he managed to blow the creature up using the power of his weapons. Kay, who was hiding, was surprised to realize that he had killed the creature without even moving. Minoru asked what Lion was doing there, but quickly dropped the subject. He said they had to get out of there as soon as possible so he could visit his grandson. However, Lion begged for his teacher to return. The country was in a state of emergency. Minoru's granddaughter was safe for now, but they needed him. To convince him, Lion showed a photo on his phone of the granddaughter tied up and gagged. Kay was shocked by all that and wondered if they were trying to force Minoru back into the army. And how could someone at the top of the hierarchy be treated that way? Who was that old man, really? Minoru, seeing the image of his granddaughter in danger, realized he had little choice. He accepted that he would return. Kay, who had been watching everything, was so shaken that he collapsed to the ground, exhausted from overusing his powers. Lion, upon hearing the noise, approached and found only a little baby on the ground. He immediately pointed his sniper rifle at the child's face, thinking that the baby was the same monster that had just been there, but Minoru stopped him from shooting. He said that child was there for a reason. Then he picked Kay up and loudly said he had done a great job. However, he whispered in his ear to pretend to be a normal baby, or he would be killed. Kay understood that the old man was trying to help him, so he began crying like a real baby. Lion found the scene curious and said it looked like his teacher had bonded with the baby. He suggested they take him along too. But Kay, before fainting from exhaustion, stared intensely at Lion's face, trying to remember where he had seen him before. He was almost certain he had seen that face in the organization. Later, Kay woke up inside an incubator, in recovery. There were several other babies in that room. He started to wonder where his mother was, where the old man was, and what place that was. At that moment, another baby woke up and started crying. Lion approached and said the child had a lot of energy. He then used his power to make the baby sleep a little longer. Upon seeing that, Kay recognized the man. He was an important figure in the organization. organization. He had an extremely powerful ability capable of manipulating blood, which explained why the creature on the rooftop had exploded before reaching him. Lion had destroyed the creature by manipulating its blood from the inside. Kay realized, startled, that the baby was not simply asleep. He had fainted due to lack of oxygen. He now understood that he had to be very careful with that man. When Lion turned around, Kay quickly closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep. Lion slowly approached, came very close to Kay, and commented that the inspection was about to begin. He spoke to the baby, as if suggesting he take a nap. To avoid being affected by Lion's power, Kay pretended to be unconscious. When he was finally alone in the infirmary with only the other babies, he managed to get up. He thought that the monster he had defeated before was a mental type, and because of that, he now had resistance and a mental barrier that protected him from Lion's attack. He had even timed the exact moment when his blood flow would drop, allowing the fake blood to be absorbed automatically. However, the most important thing now was to observe the place around him. All those children raised a disturbing question. He wondered if they were all also calamity eggs. It was a term he knew very well from his past life, thanks to the organization. Kay knew that in the future, the army would cease to exist because of the organization. He also knew that Minoru wanted his granddaughter back, while Lion was using the situation to blackmail the old man. Faced with that, he began to wonder what exactly this so-called inspection was. He was sure the situation was far from good. He did not know where his mother was, nor where the dog had gone. He tried to free himself using his stinger power, but nothing happened. He had fused all the crystals he had obtained so far to create the power of shadows, and the problem was that in the fusion, all the other crystals had disappeared. Now he could only use shadows and the mental barrier. The mental barrier was not useful for escaping. The shadows were too powerful and would cause massive chaos in that place before he even understood Lion's true intentions, so he could not use them recklessly. Suddenly, he noticed a baby who could grow roots from his body. Kay realized that baby was compatible, just like him. He was an awakened one. He was not the only one. Kay saw several others. One electric baby, another who could turn invisible, and before he could think further, he was grabbed by the root baby's vines and thrown across the room. Another child, a bit older, caught him and kept him from getting hurt. Kay was impressed, because that child looked about 5 years old and already had full control over their power. Before he could say anything, the lights went out. The child realized what was happening and ran off, understanding that the inspection was starting. Several nurses entered the baby room. Each one picked up a child and took them to a completely dark and extremely strange room. The only light came from a high window. Kay began to fear that they would make the babies fight to the death, like in the organization. When he looked up, he saw Lion watching everything through the window. The cry of a baby caught his attention. A large monster was approaching the child, ready to devour it. Kay realized that the purpose of that place was not to make the babies fight each other. They were being used as prey for that creature. The monster was chained, but that did not mean they were safe. All the children were in total panic. That 5-year-old child was the first to pull a baby away from the monster. Kay then understood the organization's objective. In that room, the babies did not fight each other. They fought monsters. The organization wanted to awaken their powers as early as possible so they would grow up to become rank S individuals. That was exactly what had happened in his past life. The difference was that back then he had been older. Now he was just a baby. Kay believed that everything was Lion's fault, who seemed eager to see how far the babies could go. He asked them not to disappoint him and, right after that, pressed the button that released the creature. The first target was Kay himself, who had to dodge quickly. He knew he could easily defeat a second-grade monster, but this one seemed to be on a much higher level. Meanwhile, all the other children were completely terrified. None of them could move. When one of them started crying in pure desperation, the creature turned in her direction. That was when the baby with the power to create plants reacted, using its roots to trap the monster for a while. Even in the midst of panic, that child managed to protect the others and did a good job. Kay silently hoped they would keep it up. Lion, observing everything from above, showed interest in the child's plant-based abilities. He found it interesting. However, he noticed that Kay had not revealed any power yet. That caught his attention. He imagined that perhaps the boy's power only activated in extreme situations. Meanwhile, Kay was trying to come up with a plan to defeat the creature, but it had already broken free from the roots. He estimated that the monster was at least 3rd ranking, but he had no choice. He needed to defeat it. He used the vines left behind by the plant baby to approach and activated his mental barrier, trying to affect the creature's mind. However, the monster easily shrugged off the attack. With no other options, Kay decided to go for direct combat. He used the vines again to gain speed and landed a punch with all his strength on the monster's jaw, knocking it off the platform that served as an arena for the children. But before falling into the abyss below, the creature used its tail to grab Kay, pulling him along into the fall. He was being dragged to his death until someone cut the monster's tail and pulled him back. The one who saved him was a robot from the organization itself. They did not want the babies to die. They just wanted them to awaken their power. A soldier informed Lion that the defense system had been activated and asked if they should proceed with the Hound project. Lion thought that bringing Hot back, the granddaughter of that old man had been a good decision. Her robots were proving to be very useful. Kay, on the other hand, had an innocent smile on his face, looking like a silly baby. Lion wondered if the boy thought all of this was a game, but he knew he had only been saved because he was special. However, Kay was starting to feel unstable again. Just like in his past life, he knew he had to obey the organization to survive, and he could not stand it anymore. How long would he be their dog? Then, looking toward the cliff, he saw that the creature was still alive, clinging to the rocks. Without thinking twice, Kay jumped. Hot's security robot tried to reach him in midair, but the creature used the moment to attack and destroyed the robot. Both the monster and Kay fell together into the abyss. The soldier, seeing that, asked Lion if they were not going to do anything, since the child was falling. He also asked for permission to rescue the specimen. Lion refused. He said the drop was not that high, and the rescue was unnecessary. He stated that Hot's robot was strong enough to defeat a 5th-ranking monster, and, based on what he had seen, that fall would not be enough to kill Kay either. He then ordered them to continue with the Calamity Egg project. The fall really was not enough to defeat Kay. Before hitting the ground, he activated his shadow transformation and landed on his feet. Upon observing the place, he realized he was in some sort of underground junkyard. At the end of a tunnel, there was an exit, but also several creatures scattered along the path. However, they all seemed nearly dead. They looked like discarded experiments. Faced with that, Kay decided he would do them a favor by freeing them from their suffering. When the horde of half-dead creatures advanced toward him, he used his shadow stinger to quickly massacre them. It was way too easy. His instincts were returning to normal, and he began to regain part of his power. Among the wreckage, there were many monster crystals. Kay used his tail to absorb them, even though he knew they would not be very useful, since most of those monsters seemed to be, at best, rank 2. The recovered energy would be limited. But then, at the bottom of the junkyard, he saw a solitary figure still standing. It was not just any monster. It was a clearly intelligent creature, capable of wearing a mask and wielding a sword. Kay wondered if that was the king of the place. He did not like its appearance. In response to his approach, the swordsman split into 3, which made Kay think it might be a soldier-type monster, with the rare ability to create clones. Without hesitation, Kay launched an attack, but soon realized that the swordsman was not focused on him. The creature passed by, ignoring his presence, and began eliminating the other monsters in the junkyard. After finishing them off, the swordsman still showed no interest in Kay. When he tried to get closer again, he noticed the swordsman remained still, as if its only function was to guard the tunnel exit. To test this, Kay ran toward the exit. As soon as he did, the 3 swordsmen attacked at the same time. He believed he could dodge easily, but that was not the case. With a moment of carelessness, he lost his right arm made of shadows. Even so, he stepped back and kept smiling. Things were getting fun. He told himself he could win with just one arm. Then the 3 enemies charged again, but this time he fought back and threw them into a pile of trash. One of them fell and did not get up. Only 2 remained. Kay thought the fight was fair now. However, he did not expect that 2 swordsmen would be even faster than 3 together. Their combined blade attack slashed his entire body, and he realized that their strength had now increased. With more clones, they were weaker. With fewer, they were stronger, and that put him under enormous pressure. He was hit multiple times and even lost part of the shadow layer protecting his body. He knew he had to focus. He needed to get out of there, so he decided to do more than just use the shadows. He summoned his own shadow, which took on a conscious form, and it responded, saying he was doing a great job, but that it was even better than him. When the swordsmen tried their next strike, the shadows said they no longer needed to maintain a human form. Kay's body dissolved, taking the form of a symbiotic slime made entirely of shadows. With that, he was able to easily eliminate the 2 remaining swordsmen. In the end, only one body was left on the ground, the original. Kay approached and saw an identification tag on the swordsman's chest. He discovered that it belonged to the same squad as Lion. That was completely insane. It meant Lion had sent one of his own companions to die in that place. When Kay extracted the creature's core with his tail, he noticed it was a much more refined crystal than the others. From the shape, he knew exactly what it was. It was a rank C monster crystal, and that left him completely shocked. Kay thought that if a rank C monster was in that junkyard, then there had to be even worse things on the upper levels. And if rank 5 creatures had already appeared, what would show up within a month? Even worse, he knew that in just 2 days, another crimson mist could reach the humans. That is why he needed to find his mother as soon as possible. He was certain she was in danger. Before he could leave, he heard footsteps approaching. He hid among the wreckage and saw several guards escorting Hot. The first thing she did was take off her jacket, saying the place was too hot. She complained about the situation, wondering why that place had turned into a junkyard. Apparently, that space used to be her room, and now it was too disgusting. One of the guards told her to raise her hands, saying she had to go with them. But Hot replied that he must be new to the organization, not to know who she was. With a voice command, she summoned her mechanical allies. Robotic tentacles came out of the ground and easily grabbed the 2 soldiers. Using the power of her little robots, she cleared the path. Her first spider bots efficiently eliminated the low-ranking monsters. One of those robots tried to attack K, but he defended himself without difficulty. Even so, Hot noticed his presence and got straight to the point, moving toward him. She recognized him and accused the boy of having destroyed her little robots. K admitted that he truly had not expected a girl like her to be that strong, but Hot replied that her advantage in combat was not physical strength. As she said that, her robots charged directly at K. After a massive smoke explosion, she expected to see him injured. However, when the dust settled, he was unharmed. With a series of spears made of shadows, K destroyed each of the robots. Hot began to wonder if he really was a compatible subject as powerful as he seemed. K said he might have gone too far, that it was indeed wrong not to hand over the market supplies, but that this had already gone too far. Hot asked if he was the so-called K, and he confirmed. He said that since she guessed right, she would get a reward. Then, he placed a knife to her neck. Hot asked for a pause and questioned whether he really had to act that way. K let her go. He had no intention of killing her. Then he wanted to know if that place was her base. He needed to understand what was really going on there and asked if she knew anything. He found it strange that a hacker's base looked so destroyed and messy. Realizing that K had no intention of leaving, Hot began using her little robots to clean the entire area, collecting trash and scrap spread all around. She wondered who had caused so much damage. It was so messy that she could not even enter her own lab. Meanwhile, K was calm, taking the opportunity to collect magic crystals he found around the junkyard. He thought that now, with his shadow power, he could keep his abilities active indefinitely as long as he continued absorbing those crystals. For now, he decided to keep his ability a secret. Meanwhile, Hot had finished what she needed to do. She managed to open the door to her own office, which was actually a small room crammed with computers, machines, and monitors everywhere. Without wasting time, Hot asked the computer to show what caused all the mess. Through the security cameras, she noticed that Lion was involved, but also saw the white-haired woman, Miss Anya, who commented that Lion had fallen into a big trap. Even so, Lion responded that he did not have much time to talk to her. Anya said that was fine, and without hesitation, drew a blade from the palm of her hand. Even though Lion reacted in time and drew his weapon, she was fast enough to slice his gun in half and still stab the golden blade into the arm he used to defend himself. Right after, Anya pulled the blade out and stepped back, saying she did not enjoy playing with prey that got scared so easily. Without proper treatment, that injury could cause serious problems, which was especially bad for a soldier like him. Lion asked if she was really willing to attack a soldier inside a military base and what exactly she was planning to do. Anya, however, replied that there was no need for so much tension, since she had only come there to promote a special item from the organization, a powerful medicine. Before he could react, Anya approached and used her hypnosis. She directly transferred disturbing visions of the past and future into his mind, showing Lion's suffering at the hands of monsters and being abandoned by his own soldiers. When he asked what she wanted, Anya said he was destined to receive her gift and become a knight. Under the effect of hypnosis, Lion accepted that special medicine and injected it into his own chest. While all of that was happening, Kay asked for a zoom in on the woman's face. When Hot followed the request, he realized that she was one of the organization's administrators, someone above everyone else he had met so far. The pattern in her eyes was the wheel of fate. He then understood that she was the one behind everything. However, Hot herself did not understand what she was seeing. It was the first time she had seen that woman, and she could not believe that Lion had once been part of the army. Noticing that Kay was distracted by the monitor, Hot activated one of her spider robots to spy on him. Meanwhile, Kay asked for the recording to be replayed. After injecting the medicine, Lion received the promise of the revenge he so deeply desired, and was told he could transform that place into something much greater by fulfilling a much larger mission. When he returned to the military camp, one of the soldiers asked if he was also using that medicine for some experiment. He commented that if his master found out he was being so reckless, he would surely get a slap to the back of the head. Lion replied that it might be true, but assured him everything had gone well and that no one would ever find out. While distracting his companions with that conversation, he released a monster from the organization, the core that consumed everything. The parasitic power spread, and the soldiers began killing each other. One of them, before completely losing control, asked why Lion was doing that. At that moment, Lion realized that his friend was also a special type. He began to transform right before his eyes. As he left and abandoned his former allies, Lion stated that one day he would receive the baptism of the Crimson Dust and become an extremely rare and high-level adapted being. Even though he had grown up with those soldiers in the orphanage and fought alongside them as companions, he had seen the future where they would all end up killing him without giving him any chance to survive. They had not done it yet, but they would. That is why he decided to turn them into mutants before they had the chance to betray him. When the other monsters, unable to control themselves, charged at him, Lion used his new power to explode them in blood and said that, in the end, it really was a shame. It was not just the soldiers who were overtaken by the parasitic power. Even the doctors ended up being infected. The last soldier, who was Lion's companion, still had enough strength to ask that the monsters not be allowed to escape, as they would consume everyone else and cause the deaths of many innocent people. At least that favor Lion granted. He threw the slimes back into the cave and sealed the entrance, along with the new monsters he had just created. Barton, Lion's companion, who had been transformed, thought that the damn monster would disguise itself out there. There were still many people he wanted to protect, so he decided to guard that place until Hot and the other allies returned. Then he started killing all the monsters using his adapted power. When one of the allies finally returned, he found Barton already transformed, standing atop a pile of corpses. Without understanding anything, he asked what had happened there. Upon seeing the dead soldiers, he asked if Barton had done it. He also noticed that some soldiers were still alive and tried to leave to get help, but ended up being pierced by Barton's blade and thrown to the ground like the others. Deep down, Barton only wanted to protect others from Lion, but he ended up corrupted by the evil power. And it was at that moment that the camera broke. Hot informed them that the recording only went up to that point. Kay reflected that apparently Hot did not know Anya, meaning she did not know much about the organization. Currently, the greatest threats came from the monsters created by the Crimson Dust. It was one of them that killed him in his past life. Now he was beginning to suspect that perhaps the organization was responsible for triggering the great catastrophe that struck the entire world. If that were true, the White Squad had been trying to bring the organization down at the time, but they ended up being defeated by the same Anya who turned Lion against them. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Hot's stomach growling, which made him realize that he was also very hungry. Thinking about it, it had been a long time since he last ate anything, and there was still the problem of being trapped in a baby's body. At that moment, Kay asked if the great hacker Hot had already finished her work. She explained that there was nothing more she could do since the camera had been destroyed. Then Kay pointed his blade at her neck and declared that, in that case, she was no longer useful. However, Hot counterattacked using a robot she had previously implanted and hidden. That was when someone else appeared and struck Kay, but it turned out to be Minoru. When they recognized each other, Hot asked if her grandfather knew that man. Kay asked Minoru what he meant by grandfather, but the two simply stared at each other for a moment. Later on, they were eating together, having a big meal, talking about everything. During the meal, Kay asked if it was true that Lion had locked Hot up and was conducting strange experiments. If that were true, his apprentice would now be their enemy, right? Then Kay wanted to know if Minoru had some kind of plan. Hot interrupted, telling them to eat first and decide that later. Minoru agreed, saying it was a good idea and that they needed to replenish their energy. Then he handed a little milk box to Kay and asked if that was all he could consume now, right? Hot started laughing at him, saying he was just going to drink milk like a little baby. Minoru then asked if she still didn't know the truth. Kay questioned whether it was really wise to tell her. Minoru explained that if they were going to truly cooperate, they needed to be honest with each other. That was when Hot, finishing her soda, asked what they were talking about. Kay said it was fine. Then he deactivated his shadow form and revealed his true appearance. He was, in fact, a baby. That made Hot spit out the remaining soda foam and ask in shock what that was. She was confused, trying to understand if, in the end, he really was just a little kid. But Kay, now with the appearance of a baby, showed his claw made of shadows and warned her that he could still kill her if he wanted. Minoru told her to stop provoking him. Hot complained that both Kay and Lion kept picking on her just because they had powers and she didn't. Kay thought that revealing his identity was acceptable, but the problem was that everyone always underestimated him. Even trapped in that small body, he still had legendary level abilities. It was true that this also prevented him from using all his power, but maybe that was actually a good thing. It would be smart to keep his powers hidden from the organization, at least while he gathered information about everyone. Kay then asked what their next move would be. Minoru stood up and explained that inside that base there were other squads and platoons. The most influential one was called Snow Wolf. The executives of that squad had already been defeated by Lion himself, but the one truly commanding Lion now was the hand of the organization. The children were scattered throughout the place, which made a frontal attack very difficult. Before anything else, they needed to save those children. If only they had someone infiltrated as a collaborator, everything would be easier. That was when Minoru looked directly at Kay, who still had the appearance of a baby. He said that if the Snow Wolf unit noticed anything strange going on, they would all be in trouble. Then he asked if Hot could transmit fake images. Hot, feeling underestimated by her own grandfather, typed quickly on the computer and, in a matter of seconds, had activated all all the robots, saying she would charge them for that service one day. Minoru replied that in that case, she couldn't stay there and simply threw her out of the cave. After that, he asked if he could trust Kei to rescue the children. Kei replied that he had some problems earlier, but now everything was fine. The first thing he did was create a copy of himself using his shadow form. With that, it was no longer just baby Kei, but an adapted one carrying baby Kei in his arms. He told Minoru to leave that mission to him, and when Minoru closed the door, Kei said, filled with hatred, that he was dying to kill that damned lion. Kei thought that monster would still see only one thing. Meanwhile, the little babies were still being chased by the creature. With the help of Hot's robots, Kei was climbing back to the platform where everything had started. The monster almost managed to devour its prey again, but it was struck by the power of one of the older children, who had already learned how to control her abilities well. The other Kei, the one who was the monster, looked around and wondered who he should grab first. The vine child only screamed and ran. The invisible child could simply take off her clothes and disappear, which he thought was very stupid of her. He also could not catch the older child, because she was protecting the others, so he decided to attack the ones who were not panicking first. With his shadowy tentacles, he pulled all the little babies off the platform. They were desperate, but they were saved by Hot's robots, who grabbed them. Soon after, the Snow Wolf soldiers were alerted that several children had fallen from the platform. Very carefully, Kei placed all of them down below in the dump and thought that the whole thing had almost gone terribly wrong. But someone spotted him at that moment because he had climbed up to the platform to do that. Meanwhile, in another part of the base, they were performing a shock treatment on a monster created by Karmazin dust. Lion appeared saying they were making too much noise and asked if that could attract unwanted attention. The skinny one, who was taking care of the creature from the organization, answered with contempt, asking if that was how he talked to his own master. With just one look, he made Lion's entire body ache. He fell to his knees, powerless, and apologized, saying he had gotten a bit irritated. Anya appeared asking what was happening with Haiyan, wanting to know if he was out of control again. He answered that it was hurting. It hurt too much. Even so, he continued the shock treatment on the creature and said that even though he had gained his powers thanks to the Karmazine blessing, it was still very painful to carry that kind of strength. He wondered if it was because he was not strong enough. Anya tried to calm him again and asked Lion what had happened to the children. He answered that they were still in the testing phase. Back on the platform, the one who caught Kei was the older child. She asked who he was and what his goal was. Without waiting for an answer, she launched a blast of sand so strong that it threw Kei off the platform. Even so, he landed on his feet using his shadow power. He asked the boy to stop making the situation even worse and asked if he happened to be Xiao, the one who, even after being severely injured, managed to survive and became an adapted. He said that Xiao was lucky but had paid the price of being in that body. Xiao asked why he did not return with them. Kei replied wanting to know return to where. Return to the captain's squad, the captain who betrayed him. Xiao said that depending on the situation, sacrifices were necessary, and that Captain Lion certainly had his own reasons. Kei became furious and asked if he was being serious. Abandoning children in a dump to be devoured by monsters was worthy of a captain. Xiao answered that it did not matter. As a soldier, he should only obey orders, and because of that, he would continue obeying Captain Lion until the end. Using his power of dust and sand, Xiao tried to trap Kei, who admitted that he did have good abilities. He also noted that Xiao had not been brainwashed, because he was already stupid even before that. Then Kei decided to counterattack with the power of shadows, saying that if Xiao did not understand the easy way, he would understand the hard way. His attack was so strong that he pushed Xiao away, throwing him directly into the attack range of one of Hot's robots. But the robot did not attack. Instead, it projected a hologram and displayed a message. Minoru appeared in the communication and asked Xiao since when Lion had become the supreme commander of that base. Xiao was confused and wanted to know if his boss was still alive. Minoru then said firmly that a soldier was only a soldier if he remained human. Using children in experiments was a cruelty that could never be justified under any circumstance. And as the new supreme commander, his order was to take all those children to a safe place. Xiao, even hesitant, accepted the order and began to obey. Meanwhile, the new members of the Snow Wolf, the adapted ones who were also in the base, started acting to prevent more damage. But they arrived too late because one of the walls exploded with a burst of sand launched by Xiao, who was carrying a boat full of children. Kei shouted excitedly, telling him to go at maximum speed. Xiao complained that he did not take orders from him, making it clear that he still did things his own way. Meanwhile, the children inside the boat began to vomit because of the speed. The adapted ones saw the movement and tried to react. Kay looked at them and said that those were just small fry, not even worth the effort. Even so, the boat kept smashing through the walls with force. One of the adapted ones informed the squad that there were children escaping. Through one of the robots, Hot entered the communication and spoke to Kay, complaining that they were making too much noise down there. She said it was total chaos. Through the radar, she noticed that many people were already chasing the group. Kay answered that everything was fine. After all, they had her on their side. Roach asked if she would always clean up his mess, but Hot activated her robotic prosthetics and began using 4 keyboards at the same time. She said she was not complaining. For her, cleaning that mess would be easy. As they continued breaking through the walls with the sand power, the soldiers tried to intercept them, but the base defense system was turned against the soldiers themselves because Hot was the one in control. Those who were not hit by the security system ended up being blown apart by one of Hot's bomb robots. The rubble in Xiao's sand suffocated the ones left on the ground, and Kay thought that this was the true appearance of one of the greatest intelligence organizations in the world. Hot then called Kay's attention, telling him to keep his eyes forward, because she did not have robots positioned in the area they were heading toward. According to the radar, it seems someone had already arrived there. It was probably Lion's elite squad. When they arrived, they saw a platoon that really looked more prepared than the previous ones. In fact, they were even betting among themselves to see who would kill the most. The soldiers had their rifles pointed, ready to fire. Kay had to save one of the children using his power, because the bullets were passing through the sand. Even so, he wanted to save his energy for later. The shots continued piercing through the sand barrier with ease, and Kay was caught off guard when one of the children was left exposed. But instead of being hurt, she used her own power, a scream so powerful that it sent the bullet back with sonic force. Another child also protected herself using ice spikes. While they defended themselves on their own, Kay focused on eliminating the enemies and thought that, in the end, those children actually had some very impressive abilities. Later, in the elevator of the central platform, the boat propelled by the sand power reappeared. Kay was using the child with magnetic power to help guide the route better. They advanced with such force that they ended up rising through the elevator shaft without even needing the elevator itself. During the ride, Kay was already thinking about the next step of his plan until one of the children thanked him for the help and gave him a gift, some kind of watch. Kay thought that it had been a long time since the last time he had heard a thank you, and no matter how much he tried to hide it, that genuinely made him happy. But the calm did not last long, because Lion himself appeared, asking if they had already had enough fun. He was carrying the destroyed carcasses of Hot's robots. Xiao stepped forward, trying to protect the children, but Lion said there was no reason for such nervousness, since he was only there to deliver a message. According to him, their graduation ceremony schedule had changed. Hot was surprised, wondering how he had managed to find them. She thought she had completely blocked his location with her equipment. Even so, he found them easily. Lion admitted that Hot's abilities were excellent, but made it clear that the power of Karmazin dust could not be blocked by her. Going back a bit in time, right after Hyon interfered with the Karmazin blessing, the so-called Egg of Calamity began reacting. Anya asked if among the lab rats Lion had been testing, there was at least one that was actually interesting. That was why Lion had appeared before those children. According to him, the Egg of Calamity was reacting to one of them. Kay wanted to know what exactly that egg was, but Lion did not answer directly. He only said that they were all surrounded. They were natural survivors, yes, but they had been underestimated, and now they would certainly fall. However, before he could act, the Supreme Commander Mamoru appeared to bring order to the situation. He accused Lion of covering up the truth and betraying his own unit, saying that a captain who kills his own subordinates is not worthy of the rank he carries. Because of that, he ordered Lion and the entire Snowwolf squad to drop their weapons immediately. The soldiers looked at each other, confused, questioning whether their captain was truly a traitor. But before they could react, Lion took the lead. Using his blood power, he exploded one of the soldiers and asked if anyone else thought he was a traitor. Minoru was shocked and wondered if Lion had placed blood bombs inside each of his subordinates. The situation became even more desperate when they realized that all the soldiers who had accompanied Minoru there were already dead, and Lion himself appeared behind his former master, intending to kill him. But the old man managed to react at the last moment, using his cane to defend himself. Lion commented that for someone his age, his reaction speed was still impressive. As the two exchanged blows, Kay noticed that the blade Lion was using was not an ordinary blade. When it touched the skin, it resonated with the opponent's bodily fluids, using high-frequency waves to tear the tissues from the inside out. It was the kind of weapon that killed with a single strike. However, the blade Lion was using was not a real weapon. It was only a sharp piece of blood. Even the old man's cane could break it, but if Minoru were hit directly, his body would be reduced to minced flesh. Lion then warned the soldiers that if they disobeyed, they too would be severely punished. Out of fear, they decided to obey Lion instead of following the Supreme Commander and fired at the old man, who used the body of one of the dead to protect himself. Lion transformed his blood sword sword into a spear and as he advanced, said that his master still fought very well. Then he launched an attack that the old man could not dodge. The spear pierced through the shield of flesh and impaled the master's chest, leaving him on the ground without strength. Even so, Lion did not kill him at that moment. He only ordered that none of the children escape and began slowly approaching. But then, Kay emerged from the shadows, asking who exactly was trying to run away. Suddenly, all those soldiers, and even the commander himself, melted into slime. Lion realized, surprised, that they had been substitutes the entire time. Kay commented that it had been difficult because controlling so many slime clones at once was extremely exhausting. Hot then declared that her project would finally be tested. It was the exoskeleton armor. That was what the Supreme Commander and his squad were wearing at that moment. A perfect armor for combat. The commander remembered the conversation he had with Minoru right after he had sent his granddaughter back to her room. He asked if there was any unused equipment within the army. Minoru replied yes, but that approval was required to use it, especially in personal missions. A very convincing justification would be necessary. The commander then said that if that situation was not a good enough reason, he did not know what would be. Minoru confirmed and explained that he already had the approval needed. Meanwhile, Lion found himself completely surrounded by the other soldiers. The commander officially declared the beginning of the reclamation operation. Several weapons were aimed directly at Lion's head, and Minoru asked him to surrender once and for all. But Lion replied that he could hardly believe the commander had brought the very equipment that he himself had rejected in the past. But until the end of the fight, anything could happen. After all, it was Minoru himself who taught that to Lion. Because of that, Lion detonated all the blood bombs, killing his own soldiers to damage the commander's squad. Even so, despite the protection, he began being hit by the shots and had to use an even greater explosion to vanish into the smoke. Using the power he had gained from the Karmazian blessing, Lion prepared to counterattack. Kay realized that if Lion bought time, the situation could become much worse. So he ordered the soldiers to shoot, demanding that they kill him quickly. But Lion replied that it was already too late. He guided his blood power through all the corpses scattered across the field and, using the Karmazian blessing, transformed them all into monsters. Even then, the commander ordered them not to break formation and to keep firing. A large-scale battle began. One of the monsters took advantage of the chaos to attack the children. Xuan used his sand power to intercept the enemy, but he knew he could hold it back for only a few seconds. Kate Ha thought the battle was already won. After all, the power he had awakened came from the organization itself. But now he was not so sure. The most urgent task was to find a safe place to rescue the children. Meanwhile, Lion drew his blood weapons again and said it had been a long time since he fought his master. But now the difference was that this fight would be to the death. Commander Minoru also drew his weapon and replied that it was pathetic of him. The fight resumed. From above, Rayon watched everything with excitement. He was thrilled, wanting to join the battle because it looked very fun. Meanwhile, the platoon tried to manage the situation. The order was simple: kill the monsters. One of the soldiers was knocked down by one of the creatures and was about to die, but luckily Hot's equipment was complete. The soldier activated camouflage mode and attacked from behind with the exoskeleton blades, managing to escape. However, Lion had more firepower. He could easily create more monsters, and with that power, he killed the soldier who had survived earlier. Then he said he could already see the end of that battle, Master. He said this right before clashing swords with Minoru. Even with the power of the organization and the Karmazian blessing, it was still very difficult to pierce the exoskeleton armor. Minoru activated the armor's maximum pulse and managed to repel and destroy the blood power. Lion truly did not expect the technology to have that kind of function. The commander drew his weapon as well and asked if his apprentice had not considered that he would not be able to dodge while in the air. Lion asked why not. He used his power on one of the dead soldiers, controlling the body, to throw the hood over the commander and block his vision. The commander fired, but missed because he could not see. Lion took advantage of this opening, grabbed the enemy's armor, and the two exchanged blows once again. But this time, the commander had the advantage. Minoru said that this was the end of Lion, even though he said it with a heavy heart. At the moment he fired, the barrel of the weapon was clogged by one of the Karmazian crystals, which caused a massive explosion. The commander was knocked down and fell to the battlefield. Lion covered his wound with one of the crystals and said he already knew he would need to do something decisive to defeat his master. But he also knew it would not be enough to beat him so easily. Even with part of the armor destroyed and his body scorched, Commander Minoru was still standing. His greatest concern was the children. Kay looked at Hot and asked if that armor was just for show, since it did not seem to do anything. Hot replied that he should not be so impatient, because they were only getting started. Even though she was also worried about the computer, she managed to calculate all the damage done to her grandfather's body. Hot already had a perfect strategy for moments like that. Without hesitation, she launched a new horde of robots directly toward the battlefield. They were activated to reinforce the defenses and ensure the protection of the children. Each robot was programmed to act in a coordinated way, creating a defensive front while the Allies reorganized.